Your body didn't quit. Your borrowed identity, did you keep calling it exhaustion? You wake up already heavy, already behind, already bracing for a day you haven't even started. You blame the schedule. You blame the sleep. You blame the coffee that isn't working anymore. But somewhere underneath all of that, you already suspect the truth, and it's not one you like saying out loud. You're not tired from living your life. You're tired from performing someone else's. Think about the last time you said yes to something you didn't want to do. Not because you were forced. Nobody held a knife to your calendar. You said yes because saying no felt like it would cost you something. Approval, comfort, the image you've spent years building in other people's minds. That yes didn't just take an afternoon, it took a piece of your nervous system with it. And you've been paying that toll so often for so long that you've mistaken the debt for your personality. This is the part nobody tells you about growing up. You don't arrive into adulthood with a self already built. You arrive with a rough sketch, and then everyone around you starts filling it in. Parents who needed you to be a certain kind of son or daughter, teachers who needed you to be manageable, friends who needed you to be agreeable, a culture that needed you to be productive, likable, impressive, safe, and you wanting to belong more than you wanted to exist honestly. Let them hold the pen. By the time you're old enough to notice what's happened, the sketch has become a full portrait. Except it's not really you in the frame. It's a composite. A little bit of what your mother wanted, a little bit of what your first boss expected, a little bit of the version of you your partner fell in love with, that you're now terrified to stop performing in case the love was actually for the mask. And here's the cruelest part. You don't experience this as confusion. You experience it as fatigue, because carrying a false self isn't like wearing a costume you can take off at night. It's like carrying a second body everywhere you go, one that has to be fed with validation, protected from disapproval, adjusted constantly to fit whatever room you're standing in. No wonder you're tired. You're not living one life. You're maintaining several simultaneously and calling it just being a responsible adult. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private journal, the one we now call Meditations, mostly as a way of talking himself back into his own skin. He was the most powerful man in the known world, and even he had to remind himself again and again not to become whatever the crowd demanded of him that day. If an emperor with legions at his command felt the pull to dissolve into other people's expectations, what makes you think you're immune? Sitting there with your phone buzzing with messages from people who all want a slightly different version of you than the one you actually are. The Stoics had a phrase for the only thing that's actually yours: prohairesis. Your capacity to choose, not your circumstances, not your reputation, not what your family thinks a successful life looks like, just the raw, quiet power to decide, in this moment, who you're going to be. Everything else, the opinions, the comparisons, the imagined disappointment on someone's face, if you finally say what you mean, all of that is what Epictetus called not up to us, and yet you've spent years treating other people's opinions as though they were the very ground you stand on. That's why you're exhausted. You've built your entire foundation on something that was never solid to begin with. The shifting, inconsistent, often contradictory expectations of people who, if you're honest, aren't even thinking about you nearly as much as you assume they are. Here's a question worth sitting with, uncomfortably, for a moment. If every person whose approval you've been chasing disappeared tomorrow, no explanation, no consequences, just gone, who would you become in the silence that followed? Would you finally rest, or would you panic, because you genuinely don't know who's left when the performance stops? Most people never ask themselves that question because the answer terrifies them more than the exhaustion does. At least exhaustion is familiar. At least exhaustion has a name. The alternative, discovering there might be very little you left once you strip away everyone else's expectations. That's the real fear driving the fatigue, so you keep performing. It's easier to be tired than to be unknown, even to yourself. But consider what Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, watching men around him chase status, wealth, approval, all the external markers of a life well lived, while their internal world quietly rotted from neglect. He said the truly free man is not the one with no obligations, but the one who has stopped being a slave to opinion, his own included. That distinction matters. You're not just carrying other people's expectations. Somewhere along the way, you internalized them so completely that you started enforcing them on yourself, even when nobody else was watching. The critic in your head, the one telling you that you're falling behind, that you should be further along, that you owe everyone an explanation for choosing rest, that voice didn't originate with you. It was handed to you, and you picked it up and kept speaking in it, assuming it was your own. This is where most people get stuck, and it's worth naming honestly. The fear of disappointing others feels, physiologically, almost identical to the fear of actual danger. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish cleanly between "my boss might be upset with me" and "there's a real threat in front of me." Both trigger the same tightening in your chest, the same shallow breathing, the same low-grade alertness that never fully switches off. If you've spent a decade managing everyone's expectations, your body has spent a decade in a low simmer of threat response. That's not laziness, that's not weakness, that's biology responding accurately to a life spent bracing. So what actually changes this? Not a single dramatic decision, not quitting your job, moving to another country, or cutting everyone off in one furious act of reinvention. Those are just other performances this time, for an audience of people who admire boldness instead of compliance. Real change is quieter and far less cinematic than that. It starts with noticing the next time you feel that particular flavor of tiredness, the one that shows up right after you agree to something, or right after you swallow an opinion you actually hold, or right after you shrink yourself to keep the room comfortable. Pause and ask, whose expectation did I just serve? Not to judge yourself for it, just to see it clearly. Most people go their entire lives never once separating their own preferences from the inherited ones. Seeing the distinction, even without acting on it yet, is the beginning of getting your body back. Then, in small, almost boring ways, start acting from your own judgment instead of the anticipated reaction of others. Say the honest thing in a low-stakes conversation before you try it in a high-stakes one. Choose rest on an ordinary Tuesday, not because you've earned it by someone else's standard, but because you decided it. Let one person be mildly confused by you. Let one relationship feel slightly less smooth for a while, because smoothness was often just you disappearing to keep the peace. None of this needs an audience. In fact, it works better without one, because the goal isn't to perform authenticity for people either, it's to stop performing altogether. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to a phrase that reads almost like a private instruction: waste no more time arguing about what a good man is. Be one, not perform one, not convince a crowd of one. Be one in the quiet, unnoticed moments where no one is grading you. That's the same shift required here. Stop trying to convince people you've changed, and just make the small private choices that actually constitute a self. You're allowed to stop auditioning for a life other people cast you in. You're allowed to disappoint someone who only loved the mask. And you're allowed finally to feel what real rest is, not the collapse that comes after performing yourself into the ground, but the quiet steadiness of a person who no longer has to check in with 100 invisible judges before deciding how to feel about their own day. Your body was never the problem. It was simply reporting, faithfully and honestly, the cost of carrying weight that was never yours to carry. Put it down, not all at once, just the next piece. The next time you notice it in your hands. That's not weakness, that's the first time in years your body will finally feel what it's like to belong to you again.